time, everybody had the Africa medallion, the leather blackstrap medallion. You all probably seen it in old Tribe Called Quest videos or whatnot, or Buddy, De La Soul. But the red, black, and green, I mean, this was a deeply nationalist moment. It was also part of a period when there was a revival in the interest of young people in black nationalist strategies, but also in kind of Malcolm X and kind of that stream of black liberatory thought. And so I had been, I was a white guy named David Goldberg in Africana Studies at Wayne State during the height of this period. And I was viewed, surprisingly, with a great suspicion by many of my peers. At the time, many of the students, you know, the big impulse was to have people like Asante come and speak to us. Or I remember one in particular, Steve Coakley, who some of you might remember. Steve Coakley gave this speech. I remember he came to campus, everybody was fired up. And the organization that Kalanji was a part of had got him into campus. And I remember going to see Steve Coakley, and he was talking about this vast Jewish conspiracy to take over the world, and how every Jew had been given a book, and everybody's looking at me, and I'm like, I never got it. I never got that book. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. But it was a heady time because the year I came basically was in the midst of a second wave of black student activism. So in the late 80s, students at University of Michigan started organizing and taking over buildings and making demands for greater representation of black faculty and students. Same thing happened at Wayne State. The department where I work now, African American Studies now, was founded in 1991 after students occupied a building in 1989, right? So around that same time too, 1990 at Eastern, students had kind of nutted up, and it was part of this wave, very similar to the wave that's been going on since Black Lives Matter started. And not so surprisingly, the demands were all the same, right? That the institutions were abandoning black students, weren't concerned with retention rates, having black faculty members, a greater black presence, diversity, all these same issues that remain today. And it was at this moment that Dr. Peters was hired into our program. So we owe Dr. Peters at Eastern directly to the activism of students. And that's a very fitting point, because this is what Dr. Peters taught us. You know, that people had to kind of make change from the grassroots up. And I want to give a couple examples about him as a teacher, and I'll move on because I know we're going after it. I was thinking about when I came here, it was hard for me to remember some of this because I stayed pretty high throughout college. But I never missed his class. I mean, honestly, I missed every other class. But Dr. Peters' class was like, I scheduled so I could move all my other classes around, so if he was teaching, I could take his class. That's how important he was to me. And cool. I mean, I was thinking about this, if you had an actor to play Melvin Peters, you would have to have somebody who was smoother than Billy D. Williams and be able to rap like H. Rap Brown or Kenny Cockrell Jr. I mean, he had it all. And you know, I hear people refer to him as P.D. I would never even dare. I mean, this dude was serious to me. This was Dr. Peters. I'm afraid to say it now. And what I remember most about his classes, and what I take from it, because this is how it's still a part of my life, is like, I teach today at Wayne. I've been teaching for years, and I'll encounter something in the classroom, and sometimes I find myself asking myself, what would Dr. Peters do in this situation? How would he handle it, right? And I gotta be honest with you, I was thinking of the examples as I came up here, and a lot of them were punitive, right? So the one example I remember, and what I've always tried to convey is my passion for the subject matter, and you demand that of the class. That as a teacher, if anybody here is a teacher, you have to command your classroom, right? And there has to be a degree of seriousness, particularly black studies, because you get students who think that this is a joke, or because they're black, they know everything about it, and then you gotta explain that this is serious. It takes discipline, it takes study, and that study is important for you to be able to liberate yourself in your mind, right? So I never, in my experience being taught, saw anybody who had greater command of the class than Melvin Peters. And I never saw anybody that could teach on a summer's day with sunglasses on and it not seem corny. And what he would do is he'd lull you to sleep with like his kind of cool cadence and all these wonderful stories. And then if you were trifling, there'd be a silence. I mean, he had the silence thing down. He would just stop, pause, make the room wholly uncomfortable but not saying a goddamn thing. He would tilt his glasses down and put you on trial. And the one that I remember, I did this. I'll end with this, and then one more anecdote. But there was one kid, and I still use this today, fell asleep in class. I mean, he would come, he wasn't paying attention. And there's nothing more frustrating as a teacher when you're teaching different people at different levels and you're trying to throw people bones and get everybody on the same page and give the people that are already deeply invested a little more to think about, and then those who are lagging behind something to grab onto. And he's doing this beautifully. I mean, it's like his lectures were like a jazz improvisation, right? You get like these bursts of improvisation, but it's all very technical and it's all very well timed, and there's a method to it. But then there's like these staccato notes, and he's got pacing, and it brings things back. I mean, a beautiful lecturer. And so I'd be pissed too if I'm putting all this time in, making this art, and somebody's falling asleep in class. Well, he looked at this kid. I can't quite do it like this, but I'll never forget it. He looked at this kid, got him up. He may have put a book on the floor, so he stepped to. And then he looked at him and said, who's paying for your college? I'll never forget this. And the kid sheepishly said his mama. And he went on for 5 minutes about his poor dear mama working 2 jobs for your trifling ass. And I'll tell you what, this was the beginning of the semester. Nobody ever fell asleep in that class again. You see people dragging, they'd be like, and it really maintained kind of like a sense of, this is serious. And so I always appreciated him for that, and I still use the book trick, by the way. But the final thing I'll say is this, is like a good teacher, black is, you said black is the mind, right? A good teacher will feed you, and you might not necessarily, it's like what Malik does, you might not reap the benefits of what you sow immediately. That things get planted and then, you have to do with it as you will. As Greg was saying, people have to take what's given to them, take those lessons and then apply them. That's part of the struggle, right? And one of the things as we went back doing this, and I was thinking about my memories, I was looking at my old notebooks, and I wrote down all these things that Dr. Peters would allude to, but I vaguely knew about but didn't really know. And I spent the majority of the rest of my life trying to learn more about those things. I mean, one of them, Chester Himes, he introduced me to Chester Himes. I've been reading Chester Himes books on and off ever since, and I'm fascinated by him. Pharoah Sanders, I'm not a religious person, but the Creator has a master plan. The Last Poets, he gave me a tape, handed it to me, didn't say anything. He was just like, here, put yourself up on this. You think you know about hip hop, Poor Righteous Teachers, Brand Nubian, but if you want to know when the revolution comes, where it comes from, check this out. That's all I said. And so those things, that kind of giving people, teaching someone how to fish, so they could eat for the rest of their lives. That's what I thank you for, because I've been, trying to use that to feed myself ever since, and I love you for it.